Good morning. Just going to wait for a few people to tap in here before we start. Okay. So this morning, I figured instead of posting this on my personal page, I figured, I am aligned with Massachusetts Survivors Outreach. I figured I would be appropriate to do the live feed here. So I'm just going to summarize for you what today's live feed is going to be about. One, it's going to be about the YouTube video I did last week on Today I Bless My Junk, Me Too, hashtag. So, and that created a lot of internal video post stuff. So I'm going to be talking about that. I will also be talking about what happened as a result of that video and my experiences and the vulnerabilities of posting. We'll also discuss some tips that victims and survivors can do to help manage the triggers and how to bless your junk and let it empower you back into a state of wholeness. A lot of these come from both my experiences, and here we go, as Me Too, but if you notice, if you watch the other video, there are different hashtags. So this time I wanted to add hashtags that were also very healing. So I also, and one of the other things we're going to do is discuss tips for everybody. I want to call everybody else. So to help support survivors, and many of us sometimes don't realize it, but we also become a bystander abuser. So I'm going to go over some tips on calls to action and what you can do to support a survivor of abuse. And I'm going to start off, interesting, when I got up this morning, and I don't usually, I've been trying not to turn on the TV these days, but the first thing I heard today, ironically, was some women entrepreneurs coming forward of what they've experienced with abuse in the workplace. And I found one statement to be very profound, that Pandora's box is open and Pandora is pissed. And I love that. At least for me, I felt like it resonated because of what I've seen happen ever since I want to call it the second wave of Me Too, because even though it started before the whole Weinstein issue, it really kind of started beforehand. So kind of like the second wave. And one of the things that I have noticed is that even sometimes survivors sometimes can become a bystander abuser. And I kind of want you to look into, this is why I call Bless Your Junk, because I want you to look at your own stuff and how to support other survivors. Okay, this is not going into victim blame. I'm just going into some of my story and what I've done to kind of heal some of my triggers and my junk. But here is some interesting statistics that I kind of want to start you off with. The cost of ignoring this epidemic, okay? And yes, according to Wikipedia, it seems as if, quote unquote, we haven't made much progress in the way of ending this never-ending epidemic. Think about that. A lot of domestic abuse organizations and survivors have been loudly speaking about trying to be heard, not only just heard, but how to heal, okay? The cost of ignoring this epidemic is $1 trillion. I really would like you to sink this in, because especially if you are a bystander or you're just coming on here to kind of learn more about what survivors of abuse go through, I want you to really think about that. $1 trillion on healthcare, crime, and economic loss alone is what it's costing the taxpayer. This is not factoring in as a result of retaliations and other things that abusers do, that this is not factoring in things like housing, welfare, food stamps, etc. Okay? Then there's an additional $8 to $10 billion with what we want to call legal abuse in the way of family courts. And this is some of the statistics I will go into. There are 58,000 children every year legally trafficked by way of family courts. You see, domestic abusers know that their last stint at getting back at the victim is through family courts. And money is key as well. Victims of abuse don't have the money to fight back, okay? Also, abusers get custody up to 80%, and if there's allegations of sexual abuse, that number is on the higher end, okay? So here are some stats that I'm just going to kind of whip through before we go into the how-tos, because I think getting that foundation is very important to understand maybe the mindset of why victims wait 20 or 30 or 40, 50, 60 years before they talk about what happened to them. Less than 1% of domestic violence cases are even reported to the police departments. Only 1%. Okay? So if only 1% is being reported to the police departments, and the statistic is only 1 in 4 survivors experience physical assault or domestic violence, is kind of their terminology, as an adult, then how many more don't speak out in those numbers? Okay? 60% of Native American women are physically assaulted in their lifetime by a partner or spouse. 60%. 93% of women that are murdered by a partner they knew, and most likely a spouse. Here are some stats from the CDC. 4.8 million women suffer physical assaults or rape. 2.8 million of those are male victims. So 2.8 million men are victimized by physical assault or rape. Up to 35% of women, up to 35% of our population, of the U.S. entire population, will be physically aggressive to another partner. How many people do we have in the United States? Okay. Remember, abuse is about power and control. Think about that. I talked the other night at a meeting, and I even talked about how even in the fire department, I talked to a fireman at a local police fire department. And they were talking about how this guy was abusing other firefighters. Okay, bullying, intimidating, threatening, and the fire department's solution for dealing with the bully was to promote him. Think about that. We reward abusers. We see it in family court. We see it in our politics. I mean, look at what's happening with Roy Moore. This man might be getting elected. We're rewarding a pedophile, okay, to be in a position of even greater power. Women are physically assaulted, are repeatedly assaulted 6.9 times by the same partner in a given year. 26% of gay men experience intimate personal violence, and 44% of gay women also experience this. Domestic violence is the leading, look at this, domestic violence is the leading cause of injury for women between the ages of 15 and 44. The leading cause. That is more than rape, muggings, and car accidents combined. 1 in 33 men, 1 in 7 women experience rape. 1 in 3 Native American women experience rape. 28% of women's first rape happens when they are a child. 22% of high school girls and 32% of college women experience dating violence. 20.6% experience 2 or more types of dating violence. Okay. CDC statistics also show stalking. 15.2% women, or one of every 6, or 5.7%, or 1 in every 19 men are stalked, harassed. Let's see. 772,000 children experience abuse in this country. 1,740 die every year from abuse. Now, one of the things that, and I will post a link to my YouTube video from last week, where I talk about blessing your junk, and it was kind of nerve-wracking for me because it brings out a vulnerability, and I know, as many other survivors feel, the fear of retaliation is great, although I didn't feel that when I was recording it. What happened is, once I posted it, I actually woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning with a serious panic attack, and reading things of what Roy Moore's people were doing to survivors of abuse, calling them Satan's warriors, or whatever they were calling, but they were tying them to be part of a satanic cult to get after him. So they were making, these are pastors of churches calling these survivors of abuse Satan, basically. And it triggered a lot of my own internal fears, even though I think I've gotten pretty good over the last 12 years. And if you go to my other YouTube video, I go a little bit more into my story, and I'll post a link, like I said, on that later. And but I want you just to think about, just because you see something on TV, and I hear a lot of women even say, well, but those are just accusations. Those are just accusations. You know, what happened to proven innocent until proven guilty? I will tell you this. Abusers are about power and control. Weinstein hired ex-Israeli military and others like that to threaten and harass survivors of abuse. The fear of retaliation, I cannot tell you, is so huge, okay? But if you're watching TV, this is how you can spot. Somebody like Roy Moore is very easy to spot. Why? Because he is on the bandwagon to seek and destroy every woman that comes forward accusing him of abuse. Think about that. So I got to give these women courage that have come forward, because I can't possibly imagine what they have gone through. So how have I managed my triggers? Okay, even after I posted my video, like I said, it triggered. I didn't realize how much of my own junk, even more so, coming to the surface. And I even talked about in my last video how, especially since the solar eclipse, truths are being revealed more than ever before. The veil is coming down. So instead of bashing on social media, the media is going on, exaggerating fit again to go, to suit whatever agenda. How about we look at, wow, for the first time, women's voice and survivors of abuse are getting heard. All of us in the industry have known for years that there is a direct link between mass shootings, gun violence, and domestic violence. As I said before, 93% of women murdered in this country are murdered by their spouse or partner. So the threat is real, okay? The mass shooting in Texas, the shooting in California recently. Unfortunately, the one in California, he shot and murdered his wife before he shot up the school. These things before you did not hear about, or the media did shut it out. So we got to bless that. These are wonderful things. The shadows have nowhere to hide. Once it hits light, it dissipates. So if you are a survivor of abuse, I want to just say to you, awareness is everything. For me, sometimes, the triggers happen because it's subconscious, you can't always control them. But with awareness, you can regain control back, okay? Instill mantras. I heard one from a wonderful colleague of mine this morning, Linda Joy, who said, in this moment, all is well. Okay? For me, a lot of times I use, I am loved, I am safe, I am worthy, I am protected. I have a mirror in my bathroom. Some of you have maybe been to my house and may have seen that, loaded with mantras like that. I am a spiritual warrior. I am with my soul, okay? Another tip for you these are things that I have done to both manage my triggers, but also help self-empower myself, okay? But these are tips I'm giving to you as well. Build the greatest love affair with yourself, especially if you are a victim like I was of gaslighting. That can be a real tough one for you to do, but I promise you, the stronger your core is here, if we are beings of light, okay, we need to build that inner light so strong that when darkness tries to retaliate or darkness tries to come at us, it can't touch us. It can't touch us and hurt us anymore. So build that love affair with yourself. Breathing. I can't tell you how important breathing techniques are. Okay, I've worked a lot. I have a wonderful elderly client I work with who actually has PTSD because of their profession, and they're retired. And being a male, too, sometimes men can be a little bit more resistant. But just something saying, this is a basic Buddhist principle, by the way. It is incorporated in some yoga techniques, and Reiki, like Jikken and Reiki is a really good, which I'll talk about that in a bit. But breathing. So if your mind is in that hypervigilant state, just with the awareness, bring that back and just start breathing. And if you have to start actually saying out loud, breathing in, breathing out, you've got to understand something. You may think it's not working, but physiologically, your mind can't be here and your body over here at the same time. When you actually are saying, I'm breathing in and breathing out, your mind and your body come back together as one. So it's being present. Practicing mindfulness, okay, is practicing presence. That was a tough one, especially if you are still in a hypervigilant state or you do suffer from PTSD. That was a real tough one for me. But I promise you, as somebody that has walked the walk, not just talking the talk, that over time wins all. And discipline is key with all of these practices that I'm mentioning to you. Discipline is everything. And where do you get the discipline? By building the love affair with yourself. Another tip that helped me, connecting to the divine, okay? And not just to the divine, but actually I take that back. When I couldn't trust the system, when I couldn't trust people, I didn't know who to trust, I went up and I built a wonderful relationship with my divine team. So regardless of what faith you have, I recommend highly that you connect to your divine team, okay? Another tip, finding a good support system. Some domestic violence shelters do offer a weekly support group. So if that is important for you, if that isn't, maybe finding some holistic practices that can support you as well. Seek out a reputable healer with trauma experience. And I mean, a lot of these healing modalities work. Some of you have heard me talk about this before, the three-legged stool. If we represent the three-legged stool, we have trauma from a abusive experience. You can't address each leg separately. It has to be addressed as the whole. One leg being the physical self, second leg being the mental emotional and psychological self, and the third leg being soul or spiritual self. Okay? You need to address the whole in order for you to become whole. Okay? So seeking out a reputable healer, whether a Reiki practitioner, massage therapist, acupuncturist, whatever it may be, but they must understand trauma, and they must understand how to work with you and to work with your other healthcare or healing teams, okay? Self-care, self-care, self-care. And even if you've never experienced trauma, that theme has been playing out like a broken record this entire year. And we've been having to up our self-care 100-fold. If you're not doing it, you need to. For me, one of the best things, I find a way to kind of disconnect from the attachments to the trauma is I go to nature. And I let nature talk to me. And it helps me get recentered, ground, and get balanced again. Another tip is to connect with your soul. I know I mentioned have the greatest love affair with yourself, but what I really want you to do is to go deep. Connect with your soul. The hardest thing, especially if you've experienced sexual trauma, whether via rape or sexual assault or incest or anything like that, there's a lot of triggers that might surface. Okay, so you might need a friend or a healer to help you through this. But I hear a lot of times, how do I let go? Well, you can't just skip over everything and say, oh, I just want to let it go. It doesn't work that way. You have to be able to feel in order to go to the next phase, which is to understand. When you can understand, then you can let go. Doesn't mean you have to have all the pieces to the puzzle, but it really comes down to awareness, okay? With awareness is the key. Awareness is everything. Now, through all my spiritual-based practices, my healthcare practices and disciplines, the healing modality that has helped me the most, and I never realized at the time when I chose to learn it, was the Jikiden form of Reiki. Now, I've learned Reiki. To me, that was a big step in my healing path from trauma, as well as a few other things, which I'll go into at another time. But Jikiden Reiki, because it cuts through the cords, and it really helped me break through a lot of barriers that everything else I tried before, I just was hitting walls. And I would highly recommend you try that if you find that might be worthy for you. But I would also, again, just like any other modality, make sure you find somebody that has trauma-informed care training and understands that. Now, here is something I'm going to go into now for tips for others. I want to call others everybody else besides these survivors, and how you can help a survivor. And before I go there, I want to read the definition of intimate terrorism, okay? Because I find that one of the things I see, especially on social media, is very good, loving people, and they are indirectly attacking survivors of abuse, and they're not even in awareness that they are doing that, okay? They're attacking like, why did she wait? She's got to have an agenda. 20 years. Why did she wait 20 years? Why is she telling now? She must be looking for money or fame. False, wrong, wrong, wrong. Here's the definition of intimate terrorism. Ongoing, complicated use of control, power, and abuse in which one person tries to assert systematic control over another psychologically. Okay? We know that pedophiles groom children to not talk. But also when we begin the healing, sometimes we have gaps in our memory, or we think that we can just, well, it's been so long, we can just move on. And then we find out, because of the ongoing ACE studies or other trauma-informed healthcare providers, that some of our health issues we've developed along the line, whether it's autoimmune, digestive, PTSD, anxiety, I can make a list, have a link to maybe some of that trauma that actually manifested physically in our body. Some of the things I do find a link to. I don't know if it's a coincidence or if it's maybe a glimpse at something else, but I have 33 women I've worked on with breast cancer and 100% link to some form of being a victim of abuse. Okay? I have a lot of women that come to me with needing, or possibly being told need a hysterectomy with a link to sexual trauma. Okay? So it manifests, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to manifest psychologically, it can manifest physically. So why are all these women coming forward now? Because maybe we feel like our voice is getting heard. And when we surround other survivors with love, then we can all heal. It's the whole shift in consciousness. And when we can support another survivor, doesn't mean coddle them. I'm not talking about coddling. That's a whole different thing. But I mean support. That doesn't mean that every time the media comes on that you go on and you say, I'm sick and tired of hearing about this. All these women want fame and fortune. They all got to be liars. They're all seeking something. How about you take a step back, and these are some tips. So when a victim comes forward, you've got to understand most are really afraid. Again, the fear of retaliation is real. And as I'm on this right now, I have serious potential retaliation just for me speaking out, okay, by certain people in power in the state of Massachusetts. And I am stating this because I want it on record if something ever does happen to me, okay? As I said before, victims of domestic violence, abusers use family courts to continue their patterns of abuse and control. Pedophiles, only 1 in 3 even see a courtroom, and out of those, only 1 in 10 even get convicted. And we wonder why. Re-victimization, the victim blaming, the stalking, the harassment. I heard today on the news these 3 women who came forward that were entrepreneurs, and she said that she built these successful multi-million-dollar businesses, and how somebody came on to her. And when she rejected him, he went to every single board member to get her fired from her own company. And so this is what we go through. These are the retaliations. The homelessness rate, because a woman has spoken up, is high. The use of drugs, alcohol abuse, many of them don't even start abusing them until they were retaliated against. Okay? So what can we do? One is listen without judgment. That means we hear this. We got 2 of these and 1 of these. Listen without judgment. Because if you are judging, that means everybody could be judging you. It's a mirror. Educate yourself. The ongoing ACE study is probably the best medical study that's out there that can help you to the long-term consequences of what happens to a survivor of abuse. Now, this also goes into, because a victim has been silenced, they develop long-term health consequences. If you're sick and tired of paying your high health premiums, you might want to look at, let's start getting the abusers accountable and start getting the survivors of abuse the help that they need so they can feel safe and whole again. Okay? Again, remember, by allowing these abusers to continually get promoted, get elected, get into positions of power, it is costing the taxpayer $1 trillion. That's just in healthcare and economic and crime statistics, and not the other components like shelter or food stamps or anything else. Be compassionate. When we come from a place of compassion, you are heard. So even if you may not necessarily agree with what a survivor says, when you come from a place of compassion, they might listen. Okay? Maybe they are in a hypervigilant state. It may be that their story isn't wrong, but maybe their delivery or inability to express it is difficult. Okay? So come from a place of compassion. And this is a big one. Don't defend the perpetrators. Whether you do it deliberately or you do it accidentally. That's why we call it bystander abuse. Bystander abuse is just, well, it happened 20 years ago, I'm going to vote for him anyway. Well, if that politician raped your daughter, would you still be voting for him? And if you were going to be a hypocrite and say no, and you're going to vote for him because he raped somebody else's daughter, then you are part of the problem. So don't defend the perpetrators. Don't say, oh, you must be mistaken. This must be wrong because they're such a great guy. They're so nice. I can't tell you how many sociopaths are the nicest to your face. They know how to build alliances so that when the victim tries to speak out, the victim has nowhere to go. And if you don't believe me, watch the movie Sleeping with the Enemy with Julia Roberts. And if you don't know that, check, the online stores or the libraries, okay? Tip number 6, don't victim blame. It is not them that are the problem. Again, maybe their delivery can need a little help because maybe it's difficult for them to talk or express themselves or find the right words. But it's not, they didn't cause anything. And just because a woman wants to feel sexy in her body doesn't give a man the right to take it at his free will. Okay? That's a woman's empowerment and right to feel whole, sexy, and whatever. It doesn't mean that a man can go and rape her. This stuff has been going on, by the way, for thousands of years. In every continent, in every culture. That the soldiers would rape the women of a tribe to gain control and to change the DNA. Insert their seeds. So this is nothing new. Number 7, don't post on social media or anywhere blaming the media as sensationalizing or embellishing. Because when you do that, you are defending the perpetrators. You're not helping to be a part of the solution. Number 8, watch a few movies if you don't know what I'm talking about. Sleeping with the Enemy is a great one with Julia Roberts. No Way Out is an actual documentary created here in Boston by 2 very well-known people, Barry Nolan and Garland Waller, who did a documentary. It won many awards on tracking the one family that was granted political asylum in the Netherlands on the grounds of domestic violence. So the family court was violating human rights, and the Netherlands granted political asylum. Now, sadly, women of abuse don't have that ability anymore since 9/11. They cannot just flee the country and seek asylum in another country because of those laws. It makes it much more difficult. Another movie is Gaslight, which is a 1944 psychological thriller starring Ingrid Bergman and Charles Boyer. To me, that sunk home, especially if you're watching all this media stuff and you're going, why is she waiting 20 years? I highly recommend you watch that movie if you never have. A lot of libraries, at least I know the local libraries by where I live, carry it, okay? If not, go on Amazon and buy it, okay? I highly recommend you watch it. And finally, I just want to say, be part of the solution. And I'm going to read a post that I wrote originally in 2013, and I thought it was still kind of relevant for today. Time to pray harder, meditate more, and constantly remind self that only light can shatter darkness. With light may there be peace. With light only love. With love there is no hate. With love there is no fear. Sometimes being empathetic sucks, but I am determined to combat these negative ways of energies being bombarded against us with all that I have learned over the years. Maybe this is why we white lighters came here, trained to defeat the darkness not by ways of war or hate, but through shining our light, healing, and unity. Now here's another thing. If you are an empath and you are watching, this affects you too. And those that are empaths are affected by these abusers much more deeply because they do have a heightened sensitivity and awareness. And then there are others that develop and become an empath as a result of what they experienced. So empaths, please, power up in self-care, okay? This is all about you. This is a time to shine our light, a time for us to unite as one. Understand that we are all one collective. To win this war, the war that rages within us must first be conquered. Love within. Wow. What say you? I thank you for watching. I hope I gave you some tips on one, how to help yourself, but also how to unite. This has been a blessing that all of these media outlets are coming forward. Now maybe we can finally work our way to peace as a society. Because until this shadow stuff comes to the surface and victims are no longer silenced, or we no longer normalize abuse, which I hear going on in college campuses where girls are getting roofied and wake up the next day and like it's no big deal, I was raped, but because I don't have a memory. Stop, stop, stop. No one has the right to violate you, whether you were aware of it or not. Let's unite. Let's support the survivors, because when we support each other, we get stronger. When we deal with our junk and bless it, on how to bless it, we become stronger. We don't let it control us. So I thank you. I thank you for watching.